Hey gang, Mrs. Wharton here. I'm going to go over what we did in class today in emergency response, and that is to talk about the contents of a go bag, or an emergency kit, a collection of objects that could be helpful if you found yourself in an emergency situation and had to evacuate your house, for example, or you were stuck alongside the road. So I'm basing this on a list that is on the CDC, Center for Disease Control website. I'll show it to you here. This is posted on the Google Classroom. This is an all hazards emergency kit. What goes in an emergency kit? The answer could be, well, it depends. It depends on what kind of emergency you would anticipate. Is it possible that there's an earthquake and you need to evacuate your house that has fallen down? Maybe a wildfire. Maybe you're broken down on the side of the road and it looks like you might be needing to camp out for the night. What's the weather like? There's all manner of different situations, but you'll start to see some consistent themes as you go through these lists. So this is, I'm going to show you the things that I actually have packed that I keep at the ready pretty close to the front door of my house. Okay, the first thing on the list, if you're following along, is food and water. They recommend that you have a gallon of water per person per day. If you have a family of 5 and you might have to camp in your lawn for a week, that's a lot of water. That's like 35 gallons or something. In my small bag, everything I have here is going to fit into this small bag. What I have here is a quart. It doesn't have to be a fancy water bottle. These empty beverage containers work just well. This is 1 quart of water, and it's not going to see me through very many days, but it's refillable. So it's a super handy thing to have. And we'll talk, I'm going to leave it out. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to purify water if you find yourself in a situation where you need to fill up from a creek, or you're concerned about the purity of the water that you have access to. A little bit of food. This here is good old-fashioned raisins and peanuts. It's kind of an old bag that went on a camping trip. It would definitely help if I was out in the backcountry and somebody was getting hypothermic or super hungry. The downfall to this, and I will replace this, is that it'll go bad. So when you think about putting together a to-go kit, you don't want to put perishable items in it. You want to make sure that if you have, you don't access any of the things for, let's say, a year goes by, this wouldn't be very high quality in that manner of time. So get something that's in a package, some granola bars, whatever you like, protein, high energy, something quick that you can enjoy pretty easily without having to cook it or have it be a big mess. Okay, food and water. I'm going to drop that in my bag. The next thing on this list is some sort of, oh, and actually I always carry a spoon also, right? So if you're in a situation, let's say you show up at a shelter, you're sharing food with other people, it's super nice to have your own utensil so that you're not eating with your hands or having to engage in a lot of throwaway utensils. And as you'll find out, everybody has a certain nuance to how they pack this bag. It depends on what you like, what you have. You aren't necessarily going to want to go out and spend a whole lot of money on this right now. So the way to start is simply by seeing some things that you have around the house. Maybe you have an extra this or that that you can throw in your bag. Okay, a flashlight. There's 2 varieties of flashlights. You probably already are aware of this. There's a headlamp. Take my hat off, show you how this works, right? There's lots of headlamps. This is a pretty cheap one, probably costs about $12 at Swain's, right? 2 AAA batteries. The thing about headlamps, super handy, but you need to be careful that you don't blind other people by shining a light in their face. This is the kind of flashlight that we use on search and rescue, okay? It's a little bit more powerful. You have to hold it in your hand and you aim it down at the ground. So, you know, some kind of a lighting device. And extra batteries, right? The flashlight does you no good when the batteries go out. Rechargeable batteries are nice. There are some things that you can get now that are wind up. Right? This is a wind up flashlight. You know, we have it around our house. I'm not sure that I would recommend it but it could be handy in an emergency. Maybe a lantern, you know, whatever you have, super handy. Okay, in the bag, batteries. These batteries, I'm gonna take them and put them in a separate baggie because all of these little objects tend to get lost in the bag. So I have a Ziploc bag here for things like batteries, small objects. First aid kit, okay? In this class, we're gonna spend a lot more time on first aid, so I'm not gonna get into this too much right now. This is a standard first aid kit that you can buy for about 20 bucks at Swain's. I don't think you need something like this. This is just an example. What they recommend are bandages and ointment, like that would be for some sort of a wound that you might be dressing. I think the ointment is optional. I want to point out a couple of things, is that, you know, you might be dressing a wound on your own self or a family member, but you might be working with someone you don't know. And if there's ever a break in the skin, it's really nice to have some gloves around. Latex or nitrile, whatever you're used to. We have some in class that I'll be giving you, so that you can make a little bag of those for yourself. And also a face mask, right? So here we are in time of COVID. If you're gonna be getting close to somebody enough to help them dress a wound or an injury that they have, you're gonna wanna put on a face mask. So tuck one of those into your first aid kit. All right. The list here also says to have some sort of a whistle as part of your first aid kit. I usually just hang this on the outside of my pack, put it in my bag separately. This, of course, would be to alert someone to where your location if you're lost or trapped or something. So one thing I want to point out, this little one here doesn't make a very loud noise. It's kind of a cheap thing. You probably wouldn't hear me if you were 50 feet away from me with this whistle. This one will shatter your eardrums if I blow it really hard, right? So if you're gonna have a whistle, make sure it just like didn't come out of a bubblegum machine, that it's actually loud. Here we go. Right? Makes a difference. Woo, that's loud. Okay, this is a noise maker, and this is interesting, like what rescuers have found in earthquakes, right? So this is a situation where somebody is trapped under rubble in a building. The sound of a whistle doesn't carry as well as a clicking noise. And so, I mean, it's a little puzzling to me that you're actually gonna have this in your pocket at all times if you get suddenly trapped in an earthquake. But I think it's interesting to know if you find yourself trapped, then you don't have a noisemaker. Maybe banging on something, knocking, making a kind of a clicking noise may catch the attention of a rescuer. Medications, a 7-day supply. So this is a personal thing. Everybody, you know, like if you personally take medications, if someone in your family takes medications on a regular basis, especially things that you really rely on, it's great to have an extra stash of medication in case you are in a situation where the pharmacy's closed, you can't get a refill. This is kind of hard to do. You can ask your doctor to write for an extra 30-day pill bottle, but sometimes insurance companies won't go for that. I've even known people to kind of hoard pills. I don't necessarily recommend that you skip doses of medications, but if you can grab a couple of pills every month and set aside a bottle for an emergency, that's a great idea. And of course, you want to make sure that they don't expire. So you kind of have to keep track of your emergency bag and make sure that things in it are up to date. Personally, what I carry, because I'm fortunate enough I don't take medications on a regular basis, but I do bring along ibuprofen and Tylenol in a tiny little bottle. Super helpful for fevers and pain. Another few things, feminine hygiene products, right? Like that is super annoying and kind of a small, non-life-threatening emergency if you find yourself trapped in a situation and you start to menstruate, right? I carry chapstick because I'm prone to chapped lips, a toothbrush, always a good idea, and a little sunscreen. Okay, so that's what goes in my sort of personal stuff. Oh, the other thing too is that because I wear glasses, I carry a little extra pair of cheaters in my bag, which, you know, if you think about it, if you wear glasses and something happens to that one pair, it'd be really handy to have a backup in your emergency bag. It's not my best pair, they're kind of junky, but at least there's something. All right. Sanitation, personal hygiene items, and bleach. All right. You see all of these Ziploc bags I have. They're super handy, they're pretty durable. And I'm going to talk about a few things. One is I carry a little bottle of soap, hand soap, liquid soap, as well as a little bottle of hand sanitizer. Why? If you have to use the bathroom in the woods, and if you're treating somebody with a medical situation, right? So it's both to keep me safe, but also to keep others safe. Speaking of the bathroom, I don't know how you've experienced it, but every time I went for a hike this past summer, I was encountering mass amounts of toilet paper behind every tree. And it's disgusting, really. And so I really encourage you, and this isn't even just an emergency thing, but if you're out and about and you need to pee or poo, it is your responsibility to not leave a mess for the next person or the next animal that comes along. Okay, so in your emergency bag, like I have toilet paper for sure, right? But if I use it out in the world, it is my responsibility to have a trash bag that I can bring it home with me, right? It is not okay to leave my toilet paper here and there out in the woods. If you defecate, right, so if there's solid waste, the recommendation in this part of the world, in this climate where we have moist soils and there's lots of biological activity, you're gonna wanna dig a 6-inch hole and bury it. You can bring a shovel along, but I find that usually you can find a rock or a stick and do a very good hole without having to have a special shovel. So you take your toilet paper and you bury the waste, and then you wash your hands or you sanitize your hands. All right, bleach. What about bleach? This really goes back to the situation with water, right? Like if you find yourself out needing to refill that water bottle, let's say from a creek, or maybe the drinking water system has been damaged in some way and there's water, but you don't really trust the quality of that water. Certainly if you have access to a stove or you can build a fire, you can boil water. You're supposed to bring it up to a boil for 5 minutes and then let it cool down. You can also use a filtration system if you want, but a lot of emergency recommendations include chlorine bleach. So you probably are familiar with bleach, Clorox, you know, these products. It's really toxic chemical, and it doesn't take very much, right? How much is it? It is a couple of drops per quart, right? So this is a quart. There's 4 gallons in a quart. And I transferred my bleach into a dropper bottle. We are gonna actually practice this in class, but it only takes 2 drops of bleach in a quart to purify that to make it drinking water, right? Now, if you've ever worked in a restaurant or anything, the amount that you use to wash the dishes, you know, sanitize the dishes or countertops, is going to be a larger quantity of bleach, but we're talking about drinking water here, right? So I put my 2 drops into a full quart, and then I let it sit for 30 minutes, and then it's safe to drink. You're barely going to taste it, okay? So, and then you got to know your quantities. You don't just put a glug of bleach into your water. Kind of obvious, right? Okay, what else? Copies of personal documents, medication list, pertinent medical information, proof of address, deed, lease to the home. You guys, any of you own your own home? You know, I understand that you are teenagers, and so really the bottom line here is some kind of identification, and that could be your passport, your driver's license, your school ID, and while you're at it, a copy of your parents' or your guardian's information as well, right? So imagine your parents are not home when the bad thing happens, and you go to some sort of an information location looking for them, right? It's really helpful to have a photo, a name, something that really is kind of like proof of identity. I got to go to the bank and get some money that, you know, ATMs are all down, my Venmo, my PayPal doesn't work. I need to be able to prove who I am, right? The other thing that I have on this document, and this video, you're not going to be able to see it, but you want to get contact information for your loved ones. What if your cell phone goes down and your contact list is gone? Do you know all of those phone numbers by heart? Make sure that you have them written down. And a good recommendation is that if you know anybody in your circle of family or friends that lives outside of the Olympic Peninsula, get a contact number for that person. Perhaps you have a grandparent or an aunt or a family friend who lives off the peninsula. Even outside of Western Washington would be great. Imagine that big earthquake that people are talking about, and the communication systems have gone down, up and down the entire West Coast. The cell towers, if they're intact, could be damaged. Everybody's trying to call, but you may be able to reach somebody in, you know, Philadelphia or Texas or Spokane, Wenatchee, somewhere outside of this region, right? And that can be really important to call an aunt and say, we're okay. Everybody call that same number. This is a little bit about the family disaster planning that you might want to do. There will be an assignment next week that you have a conversation with your family and talk about what you would do in an emergency, right? It could be very local, like what if the house catches on fire and everybody's evacuating out and you're going out the closest window. You want to identify a location in your immediate area that is safe, but is easy to get to, so that everybody gathers. You can take a head count and know that everyone's safe. And if somebody doesn't show up, that's when you need to look for them. So identifying a disaster plan could be as simple as that. Could be what happens if something happens when I'm at school and my mom's at work, something like that. How will we get in touch with each other? Who will we call? Where will we meet? Okay? Okay, what's next on the list is a cell phone with a charger. And I don't know about you, but I don't have a spare cell phone to keep in my bag. I usually have it with me, and right now I'm recording this video on my cell phone. But I do have a spare charging wire. And as you know, a cell phone is only as good as your battery charge. So that's an important one. How about some extra cash? Oh, I had it around here a minute ago. I have a $20 bill in my go bag, which I just lost, but you know what a $20 bill looks like. A little bit of cash goes a long way. Maybe you write your credit card number on your documents in case you need to purchase something in an emergency. Okay. Emergency blanket. Here, I should face the camera. Emergency blanket, extra clothes, sleeping bag, one for each person, right? Think weather. What will it take for me to protect myself from the weather, including maybe I'm gonna have to sleep out, right? And in this climate especially, we don't have very long summers, so it's oftentimes cold. One of the most important ways to keep yourself warm is to just have a hat, right? And it's small, it fits in my go bag. Maybe you have a spare cap, pretty easy, super helpful, right? What else is super easy and cheap? Well, this is like a $2 poncho, and it's really just like a plastic sheet. But plastic is good, right? It's wind resistant, it's water resistant. You can wrap up in something like that. It could save your life. When you're thinking about staying warm in inclement weather, you want to avoid cotton, right? So a cotton sweatshirt is cozy and nice indoors. It's really not very helpful outdoors. So if you have an extra jacket, this is a nice raincoat that I'm wearing here. So this is my Clallam Sheriff Department search and rescue jacket. That's a super nice garment. Long, big, really helpful. Oh, there's my $20 bill. Okay, I'm gonna put that in my bag. When you think about staying warm outside, and this is not on the list here, you might want to be prepared to build a fire. And because it's oftentimes wet, it's, around here, it's not that hard to find. Sorry, I keep turning my back to the camera. It's not that hard to find firewood around here, but it's not always dry, all right? We're gonna spend some time in class working on some fire building, but a lighter is a super handy thing to have in your bag. And I also carry, this is cheap and easy, this is like a broken candle. And if you light that with your lighter and then hold that into the fire, you can oftentimes get some pretty wet wood going because it lasts longer than that lighter, okay? All right, and finally, they recommend that you have a map of the area. And a lot of us rely on our knowledge of the area to get where we need to go, or our phone to navigate where we need to go. But a map, a paper map is going to serve you well when the power goes down. And maybe you're trapped outside at your home and you're running out of water and you're not quite sure where the nearest creek is or the nearest fire station, right? So a map is a handy thing. We'll spend some time working on that in class. All right. The rest of this list are some sort of extra things. And like I said, you may have ideas of things that you have or that you would want to add to your bag, and that's fine. And it's also depends on who's in your family. Like if you have infants in your family, maybe you want to have some extra baby formula, some diapers. If you have pets, you need to think about the well-being of your pets. One thing, extra car keys, that's handy. Anyway, one thing I want to point out is I always carry a deck of cards with me. Emergency situations can be exciting and busy and kind of crazy and all of that. They can also be extremely boring, where you're just sitting around waiting for the sun to come up. And it's also easy to get anxious and upset, and especially if you've got children around. If you have something to play, you can distract yourself, spend the time, engage with each other. A deck of cards is super handy, so I always throw that into my bag. And that is the context of my go bag. We did this in class today. If you missed class, this is what we did. And the other thing that we're doing in class is we are making our own go bag. So there's some sewing in your future, and hopefully you guys can start gathering some of the supplies that you have around your house and talking to your family about preparedness at home, what you have. Maybe you've already got this stuff done. Can you take any baby steps towards being more prepared? And that is all I got for you. Have a great day.